It is 11:07 a.m. and I am hereby calling to order our quarterly commissioners meeting. Today is December 14, 2020. My name is Carmelyn P. Malalis. I'm the commissioner and chair of the Commission on Human Rights. We have so many of our commissioners with us. So wonderful to see you, the folks who are able to join by video. I believe we also have some members of the public that are joining us. Welcome. And we have several other staff from the Commission on Human Rights who are going to be chiming in here and there with different updates. So perhaps I'm just going to call out names and for attendance purposes, I think because we're on video, it's just easier if I call them out. And if you just say here, that would be fantastic. Okay. Kathy Albisa.
Here.
Fantastic. Guillermo Chacon.
Here, here.
Rocky Chin.
Can you hear me?
We can. Thanks, Rocky.
Right.
Steve Choi. I'm not sure if Steve Choi is joining us. Perhaps not. Okay. Carrie Davis.
Here.
Hey, Carrie. Jonathan Greenspun.
Here.
Nice to see you, Jonathan. Reverend Sylvetta Hamilton Gonzalez. Hi, Bishop.
I'm here.
I see you.
How are you?
I see you. Great.
Right.
Nice to see you. Gurdev Singh Kang.
Yes, here.
Hi, Gurdev. Rabbi Sharon Kleinbaum.
Here.
Okay. Regina Martinez Estella.
Here.
Ana Oliveira. Okay. I think Anna's not able to join us. Faiza Patel.
I'm here.
Hi, Faiza.
Hello.
Reverend Terry Troya. Okay. I think maybe Reverend Terry is unable to join us. So, again, thank you all for joining us today. We have a bunch of different things to review. We want to go through, of course, we have the ability to vote as a commission on a proposed rule on race and religious discrimination on the basis of hair. As I think you all know, it is a proud accomplishment for our agency that we were the first jurisdiction in the country to announce, or to make very clear, I should say, that bans or any sort of bans or prohibitions on natural black hair constitutes race discrimination under our law. It's been well settled for a very long time that such bans and prohibitions could constitute discrimination based on religion or based on national origin. But the area of race had been, I'd say murky, is probably a good word. And as folks know, the federal and state levels, courts had in the past put themselves into pretzels to say that such bans and prohibitions were not discrimination on the basis of race. So in, I think, February of 19, the commission threw down the gong and announced that we were launching or releasing legal enforcement guidance, making it very clear that it would constitute race discrimination under our law. That prompted several other jurisdictions to pass what people know as Crown Acts, in some cases actually amending their laws in order to include it formally. But we have the proud distinction of being the first jurisdiction to actually announce it as something under our law, already existing under our law. Since it started out as legal enforcement guidance, we wanted to just formalize it. So we went through the formal rulemaking process, and I'm going to hand it off to Brittany Saunders, Deputy Commissioner at our agency, as you all know, to give a little more background on that and to allow us to start the vote process on that.
Thank you, Carmelyn. So this is a very exciting
moment for us. As Carmelyn mentioned, we released legal enforcement guidance in this area in February of 2019. We were really pleased to get not only significant media coverage on that, but a number of other jurisdictions that began consulting us and using our model to put out similar local measures. In addition, at the same time, in a number of states, there had been movement on Crown Acts, which were, state bills to outlaw race discrimination based on hair. And they've since been passed in 7 states and introduced in many, many more. And also last year, our staff, again, as Carmelyn mentioned, took the guidance that we developed and expanded it out and began working on amendments to our actual rules to clarify protections around race discrimination, race and religious discrimination, rather, based on hair. And of course, this includes both things like hair textures and hairstyles, but also hair lengths, head coverings of different kinds. We'd originally planned to hold a hearing on these proposed rules, in April, but had to postpone that due to the COVID-19 pandemic. However, on October 15th of this year, we did in fact hold our hearing, and we were really pleased to be joined by a wide range of folks who spoke to the importance of these protections and also spoke to their application to various different constituencies and communities across the city. So we're excited to have you here today to kind of take the final step and to vote on the final rule, which you all received last week and which has also been posted on our website. So moving into that process now, just going to get started with that step. So again, today we are voting on the final rule on hair discrimination as a form of race and religious discrimination. The Commission will amend Title 47 of the Rules of the City of New York to clarify protections on the basis of race, creed, and religion related to hair textures, hairstyles, including the use of head coverings and hair lengths, which are commonly or historically associated with a particular race, creed, or religion. The rule provides examples of disparate treatment violations, describes the obligations of covered entities to provide reasonable accommodations, and outlines potential violations of the reasonable accommodation requirement. And again, the Commission held a public hearing on the proposed rules on October 15th, 2020. So now I'm going to transition to Commissioner Morales to move us to the next step.
Okay. So first of all, I wanted to allow for an opportunity for any of the commissioners, if anyone wanted to make any comments or had any questions. Go ahead and unmute yourself.
I just want to thank you all for the leadership on this. It was extraordinary. It is wonderful to see New York lead on these issues across the country. To say that it created some buzz is a serious understatement. And you've just really surfaced that relationship between law and culture that we so often miss. And yeah, thank you. You just deserve to be thanked a lot and recognized.
Yeah, this is Guillermo Chacon. I'd like to echo that and to the team that worked very hard and to all the partners that we will engage, but more important, the domino effect that hopefully we will create. It's about honoring and embracing to be inclusive, and I think that's the path that this commission has been making for years, and the current leadership is testimony of that. Thank you.
Any other comments or questions before we go on to vote?
Carmel, I think this is a very good idea because we are protecting all the minorities and all the religion, regardless what language is spoken. This is a very good step to be protected and everyone in New York and America. Thank you.
Thank you all. Okay, so understanding that we are this exceptions and to clarify protections on this rule, is there any motion to initiate a vote? I see Rabbi Sharon Kleinbaum raising her hand.
I motion.
Great, thank you, Sharon. Is there a second?
Second.
I second.
Fantastic, thank you. Brittany, were you able to record those?
Yes.
Okay, excellent. Okay, so we're now going to take a vote. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Go ahead and unmute.
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. Any objections? Any abstentions? Fantastic, and the vote carries. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Wonderful. Yay, this is our, just so, just to bring awareness to this, I mean, we've now amended our rules and gone through the making process. Am I right, 5 times, Dana?
Let's see. Gender,
I don't know if
Public
Dana
practice.
can't hear me.
Fair Chance Act.
I think about 5 times.
Can you not hear me? You can hear me? Okay. I think it's about 5 times. I could go through the list,
Yeah.
but yep.
Yeah. And, you know, that is, of course, thanks to all of your support and the support of the advocates and community that have helped us come up with our legal enforcement guidance that has gone then through the rulemaking process. And 5 times within this 5+ year term is very significant. I'll just remind you all that in the last administration, for example, in the 13 years, our rules were never amended. So I think it is wonderful that we've done this, the amount of times we've already done it in order to strengthen our law and our rules. So thank you very much. So I am now going to turn to our departmental updates. First, I will talk a little bit about our, how we've been affected from a budgetary perspective, given the ongoing constraints in the city and the difficulties that the city has had, given the lack of funding support that's come from the federal government and other sources. Just so that folks understand, as you all, I think, know, in the last 5+ years, we've been able to grow considerably at the agency from where we started in 2015. The height that we have grown was from, a staff of 55 that I inherited when I came on in 2015 to, I believe in 2018, we had a staff size of 160, so considerable. But because of the ongoing difficulties that the city is facing, and that trickled down to the different agencies, that includes both budget decreases for the agencies, as well as hiring freezes that do not allow most city agencies to refill, the ordinary course of turnover. Our staff size is now at 133. We have, there still remains a lot of interest in joining the commission staff from the civil rights and human rights communities, as well as local partners throughout the 5 boroughs. And so we've had new hires on hold since, I believe, as far back as February and March. And until the city is able to change its no hire policy or its hiring freeze, we will likely still be in this state, and our numbers will probably continue to go down with again, the normal course of turnover. So if I say that only because I know that you've heard of some departures from the agency. We want to fill them. We're hoping to be able to fill them at some point in the future. Like I said, there are people who are still very eager to join the commission staff, but just the realities of where we are right now as a city, much of that is on hold. Hopefully, with a new federal administration in place, that will change as the city is able to get more funding and more support from the federal government. But until then, this is where we are. Let's turn to some policy-related updates. Dana, do you want to talk a little bit about our upcoming vote on pregnancy rules?
Sure. We will be going through I think our 6th round of rulemaking, hopefully at our next commissioners meeting. So stay tuned for we will hope to have as large a group for that as well. We held, the history on this is that in 2016, we published legal enforcement guidance on pregnancy discrimination and pregnancy related accommodations. We were the first jurisdiction in the country to pass the Pregnant Worker Fairness Act in 2014. So before we actually started, before the leadership of this agency started in 2015. And it is an area of great need of protection. It created an affirmative right to basic accommodations for pregnant people that they did not necessarily have the right to before. So in 2016, we published legal enforcement guidance on this, making sure that people understood the sort of the details and the nuances of what those protections involved. And we held a public hearing in 2019 that spoke to discrimination with respect to pregnancy, both in the workplace, but also more broadly in healthcare settings, in other public spaces. And we then went through rulemaking on our 2016 guidance, and we published proposed rules earlier this year and held a hearing in November where we heard testimony from I think 10 or 11 folks, and then we had more written submissions that will codify our protections around pregnancy discrimination. That also expanded beyond pregnancy. So we're very clear that pregnancy-related medical conditions includes things like seeking IVF treatments, abortion, miscarriage, lactation and breastfeeding, recovery from childbirth, all of the things across the spectrum, which we felt like it was very important to be comprehensive. And so we are right now negotiating with the law department around the final rules now that we've received feedback from the public. And we hope to present the final rules for your vote in February, or I assume the next meeting will be around February.
Thanks for that, Dana. I'll also just add to that, as some of you may have heard, there was also this past year was also the first time that there was a successful vote on the federal Pregnant Workers Protection Act. Several of the advocates, the national advocates who had been pushing for that, have been in touch with our office, specifically with Dana, talking about how important it is that New York City had went ahead with its law and that our implementation has been as successful as it has been. So this will be, hopefully, as Dana said, at the next commissioners meeting, we'll be able to vote on those. Dana and Brittany, do you want to talk about our city NYC peer initiative?
Sure, I can start briefly, and then I can kick it over to Brittany. So I think at one of our recent commissioners meetings, you saw you met our two public artists in residence. It's a partnership we have with the Department of Cultural Affairs, Amanda Pingbody-Pakia and Andre Wagner. Amanda's initiative, I hope you saw either in person or online. She, her public art series and campaign is I Still Believe in Our City. And it is really sort of striking and beautiful artwork that addresses and confronts the discrimination and harassment that Asian New Yorkers have faced during the pandemic, and highlights their experiences prior to some of the history leading to this, and also the current challenges. And we launched the campaign in the Atlantic Terminal at Barclays Center in the subway station, which is sort of what's called the takeover. So it covers a lot of different spaces. And in recognition of the fact that Barclays is the site of a lot of the Black Lives Matter sort of convening protests in Brooklyn, the fact that the subways are still being used by essential workers, many of whom are Black and brown, and that site specifically kind of brings together communities historically Black, geographically historically Black communities and Asian communities, and and communities that are facing gentrification. She also wanted to highlight and stand in solidarity with the Black Lives Matter movement. So the campaign is while focused on Asian New Yorkers' experiences, also speaks to the challenges that many New Yorkers have seen over the past 10 months, including the protests over the summer. And so that was our first big takeover. I believe right now there's a billboard that faces externally at the terminal. You can see it. It's really big and beautiful. So if you're driving by or walking by, take a look and see if you can see it heading out further into Brooklyn. And then we are also launching bus shelters. We were able to get free bus shelters across the city that will feature her art. Link NYC kiosks, the wireless hotspot kiosks, and a few other panels of her art are in other subway stations, I believe Flushing and Sunset Park and other ones that we were able to target for specifically Asian communities. And she will have an installation in Lower Manhattan that will feature the artwork in, I believe, 5 or 6 Asian languages as well. And we're hoping to also support it on social media with a paid campaign. Although social media has the platforms have prohibited new political ads, and these are technically political ads because we are a government agency, according to them. So as soon as that prohibition is lifted, we will be able to put those on social media with paid support. We can of course post them however much we want without it. So that is Amanda's first big initiative with us. And I'll pause there. Oh, and just one plug. There's an event tomorrow night. That's an artist talk with Amanda to talk a little bit about the art and her inspiration behind it, and also thinking about the headline, "I still believe in our city." What is our hope for the future of New York City? Why do we still all believe in it and hold it so close and have hope for the future? So if you're able to join, we can probably put a link to the information in the chat, or if you want to share it with your networks.
I just want to add that, given the financial crisis right now in the city, we were very concerned that we would not be able to have a visible public awareness campaign like this, just because of where budgets are at and where the city is at. And we are so grateful that we were able to, leverage our partnership with the Department of Cultural Affairs. And all of this early work that came into it from Amanda as our artist in residence has just been phenomenal. Many of the commissioners here provided input and made connections for us or provided quotes for us as we released the awareness campaign. I also just want to do a special thank you to Rocky, who put a lot of time and energy into this, because part of this was, of course, getting information from a diversity of API communities in the city, and as it is, working with any diverse communities, there are sometimes conflicts and challenges, and the fact that we were able to get so many different voices at the table, so to speak, in order to make this a successful launch is really a testament again to the fact that we have such wonderful commissioners who can help us with different communities. Rocky, I don't know if you wanted to say a few words on this too, since you did spend so much time with us on this.
I just wanted to congratulate the commission staff. All kinds of effort was made by everyone to get it in on time. It really isn't that often that you actually have these public art projects, and you probably can't think of too many public art projects that actually kind of are provocative and thoughtful in the way this was. In some ways, I think this was a little bit groundbreaking in that sense, especially with the rollout of the kiosk and the mural and the big, billboard and so forth. So, I think the other thing is, if we were able to not be in COVID, when this went up, we would have a chance to really get more feedback from the people, but who see it. But there is this little what do you call it? QR thing that's on the
QR codes.
QR codes, which is actually, I'm a boomer, so to me it's just fascinating. I like those QR codes because it really gives people the opportunity to go back into the website, I should just mention, I just recently got on Facebook a report of somebody who actually was also another victim. So this continues to go on. I like also the fact that this, the mural is, although addresses anti-Asian bias, obviously does address the Black Lives Matter, which I think is important. The messaging from the commission about unity is really important this time. So just want to congratulate all the people, you know, Brittany, Dana. Of course, Amanda's such a young, you know, of course, we don't discriminate, but, you know, when you think about it, a lot of the messaging coming out now that's so positive is from this new generation. So I'm very hopeful.
Thanks for that, Rocky. You know, for folks who maybe have not been able to see the images, they've been on our website. There's a press release. They've been floating around on digital, but we will also send to all of the commissioners just a link or something so that you can see all of the images as well as the press release, just to follow up on that. Turning to legislative updates. Dana, do you want to talk about some of our legislative updates?
Sure. I'll be very brief, but it has been somewhat busy, some of it surprisingly and some of it not. But the City Council passed a few bills that will impact our work. Importantly, our source of income protections, which protect people in housing based on their use of vouchers or other sort of rental assistance. Our current law has only protects people when the unit that they are seeking is part of a landlord has control over 6 or more units. So it really exempts small housing providers. And that barrier, that 6-unit minimum for coverage under the City Human Rights Law has been eliminated. And that aligns our protections with state law, which had actually moved ahead of us in one of those rare instances where the state kind of goes further. And so that expands our jurisdiction to cover smaller landlords. It moves that housing protection into all the other areas of protection under the housing section of our law. There were a couple age discrimination related bills that recently passed, including a requirement that the agency take on a specific focus on age discrimination over the next few years and report about that in a subsequent annual report. So we'll be working on that and continuing our work on age discrimination. We had published, just for folks' awareness, legal enforcement guidance on age discrimination, I believe in September. It may have been after our last commissioners meeting, and held an event around that. It also specifically speaks to COVID-19 and age discrimination in a supplemental document. And then just last week, a bill that we had worked on for years. So staff who are here in this today, but staff who are no longer at the agency had worked on it and really dedicated a lot of time and energy to it. And that is an amendment to our Fair Chance Act. The Fair Chance Act is the ban the box law that prohibits discrimination in employment based on criminal history. There were several loopholes in that bill, in that original law, that a bill that we had worked on and drafted ourselves now closes, and that includes for protections for current employees. So the existing law only covers individuals who are applying for jobs, but this now covers current employees. It covers other sort of non-criminal violations that were excluded from the original law. And so we're very excited. We think this is a very meaningful step in the right direction. The City Council just voted on it last week, overwhelmingly so, in passing it. So that is exciting, and that will affect sort of all of our work on the Fair Chance Act, including updating all of our documents and FAQs and materials and all of that. So that was an exciting development last week, and I will pause there.
Great, thanks for all of that, Dana. We're gonna just go through the rest of the departmental updates, then I'll open it up for questions or thoughts from the other commissioners in case you want more information on anything that people have reported. Sapna, can you provide an update, please, on our law enforcement activities? This is an area where we've, again, had some very exciting work announced, kind of stepping out of the norms of usual law enforcement work in our space, but proudly so. So I'll leave it to Sapna to provide that update.
Thanks, Carmelyn. I'm going to talk first about our hospital investigation that we started out. We put out a press release about it too. We had information come to us from various advocacy organizations in New York City that there was an issue with how pregnant women and their infants were being tested, and whether there was, for drug testing, I mean, and whether there was a disparity in how Black and Latinx parents were being treated as opposed to others. So we opened up an investigation, a commission-initiated investigation, by sending a request for information about the policies and practices to 3 different hospitals: New York Presbyterian, Montefiore, and Mount Sinai, who all have hospitals in 4 of the 5 boroughs. And so we hope from the information that we get from them, and by talking to the folks who are involved in implementing those policies and procedures, to find out whether there really is a disparity in the way the parents are and the infants are being treated, and to hopefully change the way this is being done in New York City. We've done this with other cases where we have sent out requests for information, then we find out what the policies and practices are. Then the commission works with that entity to make sure that they comply with our law, and that, you know, there is no discrimination when it comes to, in this case, especially healthcare. So that's the hospital case that we started.
I'm going to ring in on that and just say that, you know, this investigation follows kind of years of reports from different advocacy organizations and community organizations of Black and Brown families telling us how they were disparately treated or impacted by different hospital policies, many of them experiencing, again, drug testing without any sort of informed consent, oftentimes leading to family separation because then they get caught into the local child welfare system. I will say that it has not been unusual for us to release or an announcement of an investigation, and then for us to receive calls from the public letting us know that it's a water problem or that people are experiencing it in other spaces. And this situation is no different. In fact, I think within the first week that of our announcement of the law enforcement investigation, we received several reports or calls on our social media sites, as well as calls into the agency saying that people had experienced these sorts of things and naming different hospitals. So again, I think that, this is not a common area of enforcement for a human rights agency, but because, again, we see the ways in which normalized forms of discrimination are affecting people in daily, everyday lives. This is an area that has created a lot of interest for our agency. And I just want to say hats off to Sapna and her team for developing the investigation, and hats off to a lot of folks in the policy area like Dana and Brittany, who did also a lot of the original discussions with community groups and other groups coming to the agency and reporting this issue. Go ahead, Sapna.
Yeah. Just wanted to also add that our goal is not to end our investigation or change the policies and practices of just 3 hospitals, but to hopefully change the way hospitals in New York, all hospitals in New York City, change the way they handle this particular issue, and that there is no discrimination going forward for folks who have been caught previously in this kind of a terrible cycle of losing control of what happens to their newborns when there's one positive test of one positive drug test. I'll also talk a little bit about several other cases that we've settled. I can't talk about all of them, but I've just picked a few to talk about. We've had 2 big cases in the pay equity area as far as race discrimination goes. One was against a Burger King franchise where there was an allegation that the Black employee was being treated differently than the other employees were. And after our investigation, we ended up conciliating the case for $50,000 in damages, $14,000 of which went to back pay. And of course, we do the usual types of things that we do in conciliations. We monitor, we ask them to do policy changes, we ask everyone to go to training. So the managers and the employees are going to be going to training. They're also going to be monitored for the next 2 years. We had another case with a nonprofit, which was the same issue of Black employees being paid differently or less than the other employees were. This was a nonprofit, but we wanted to make sure that it was in one particular department. It was in their maintenance department, and that was also settled for $50,000 in emotional distress damages. In damages, and $25,000 of which was in back pay. In that case, also we're going to be doing monitoring to make sure that that this won't happen again, and that somebody's watching out to make sure that this is not going to happen again. And then in the source of income area, we settled a case in which, as I think I've talked about it before, that we have started asking that certain numbers of apartments be set aside so that people with vouchers can have access to those apartments. And there's a quicker way in which people who have been waiting to get apartments and have vouchers will be able to find them. In this particular case, we got 36 set-asides, which against Max Realty, which is a huge amount of set-asides, so that people who have vouchers will be placed immediately in those apartments. In other cases that we've settled, we've gotten anywhere from 4 to 12 set-asides, but this one was the largest, and we hope going forward that the numbers will increase and that more and more people will be able to be placed in these apartments.
I just want to pause on that one and say, this strategy of seeking set-asides in these sorts of housing discrimination cases, of seeking set-asides rather than pursuing civil penalties, was a huge shift, but very much in line with our restorative approach in resolving these situations. And given all the housing problems that we are seeing across the city and elsewhere, again, it's a strategy that I'm really proud that we're able to enforce on and implement. And there are now more jurisdictions across the country that have source of income related protections, and they have been in touch with our office about similarly implementing that approach. So rather than, again, seeking to impose fines or civil penalties in situations, actually putting aside apartments for the use of voucher holders is a significant shift and a very real way that we can be putting people into housing where housing is available and they are able to pay for them with vouchers. So.
And the next case is actually against one of our city agencies where an individual who was a survivor of domestic violence was eventually fired because the employer did not want to deal with what they thought was a dangerous situation because the spouse or the ex-spouse kept coming to the workplace. And we settled that for $25,000 in emotional distress damages and making sure that the person gets a job offer for the next jobs that, the next positions that would come up where the person could be matched with their qualifications. And then the next one is, I think I've talked before about this Hunter College case, which is a gender identity issue where a minor was being outed by the school to the parents. And they seem to have that policy only when it came to gender identity and whether the person was trans or not. And we reached out to the school in the beginning when we got one of the counselors actually had reached out to us. And when we reached out to the school, they decided that despite the fact that we had sent them a cease and desist letter and said, don't do this, please let us at least have a conversation about it, they went ahead and outed the student anyway. We then filed a commission-initiated complaint without the minor involved, and we settled that case with lots of policy changes, which really make a difference for the students who will not be outed going forward, and for $15,000 in civil penalties. Did you want to say something, Carmelyn?
No, that's great. Thanks, Sapna.
And then one last case I'll talk about is a sexual harassment in housing case, which, you don't always, we know it's out there, but we don't always get those cases. We just settled a sexual harassment in housing case where the person actually had PTSD coming into the situation, was being harassed by the super. We settled that case for $55,000 in emotional distress damages, $25,000 in civil penalties. The landlord has 38 different buildings, so we've asked them to train everyone, change their policies and practices about how they would treat people who bring forward a complaint about their staff, and also to issue an apology to the individual who had to go through what she went through.
Great, thank you, Sapna. Frank, can you round it out with CRB updates, please?
Yes, definitely. Thank you, Commissioner, and good morning to everyone. In the chat, really quickly, I'm going to include the link to the program that Dana spoke about with our artist in residence, Amanda. So you'll have the link there tomorrow at 6 p.m. if you're able to join us. Since we last met, we've had a number of different programs and engagements that I think would be of interest to you. I'm just going to name a few of them. First, we had in October a town hall addressing anti-Asian bias. As you know, since the beginning of the pandemic and everyone working remotely, teleworking started, we've been doing a number of reporting town halls. But this town hall was with the newly formed Asian Hate Crimes Task Force, which was announced late September, early October. 1 to 2 weeks after the announcement, we were able to work with them to put together this town hall to hear the issues the community have. We're in very close communication with different officials from that task force, and whenever people hear of any issues, Flora from our team, myself, a couple of other people are able to quickly get updates on what's happening. So just wanted to let you know that that type of communication is something that is happening right now. Something else that we did I believe it was in October, was the Muslim communities. It was an opportunity because during the pandemic so far, we've seen different types of harassment, different types of discrimination that people have been undergoing. And one thing that we wanted to do is we wanted to also look at communities that we haven't heard from as much, but we wanted to make sure that we're touching base. And when I say we haven't heard from as much, regarding the different ways that the pandemic may be impacting, right? So we wanted to make sure that we were in touch. So we worked with a couple of community-based organizations to put together the Muslim Communities Town Hall, CARE being one of them. Of course, we spoke about the different ways that people can report if they face different types of discrimination. We spoke about some of the policies that we've seen from the federal government and what the city is able to do to protect New Yorkers right now. That was really good, and we're hoping to continue to deepen our engagement with Muslim communities, which has been really important with the interfaith work that the Commission has done. It's the same thing as it relates to addressing anti-Semitism during the COVID-19 pandemic. We've made sure that we've upped our visibility when it comes to social media to ensure that we're putting key messages out there, making sure people know how they can contact us. We're currently looking to see if we work with Wagner College Holocaust Center on Staten Island to put together some programming. And that actually was birthed out of a different initiative that we did when we were part of the Staten Island Anti-Bias and Anti-Violence Summit, which Project Hospitality, thank you, Reverend Terry, and a number of organizations on the island put together. The Wagner College Holocaust Center was one of the co-sponsors of that alongside the Commission. And we did do some work to talk about how the city is combating and addressing anti-Semitism, and we want to deepen that with the Wagner College Holocaust Center. And of course, Jonah from our team is currently working on some curricula to talk about, understanding Jewish communities, to address anti-Semitism. We plan on starting really in schools. It's something that we spoke about in the past, and just want to give an update that we are continuing that process, working on the curricula so that we have something that we can go into the different schools, different youth programs to talk to young people about this issue as well. On the topic of young people, something that
Frank, can I just bring in on one thing? I just wanted to, this is an area too where several of the commissioners here have been incredibly helpful as we've seen, increases in both, anti-Asian and anti-Semitic attacks related to the pandemic. Several people here have been very, very, very helpful and active in helping us to work with communities within the city that we need to be working with very closely. I won't call everyone out, you know who you are, but if there are other contacts or relationships or communities that you think we need to be reaching out to and we're not, let us know. I will tell you too that, as we hear about like incidents that happen in the media, we are Frank and his team have been immediately on it, reaching out to our community partners to make sure we are providing them with information or support or liaising between them and other city agencies as we can. Go ahead, Frank. Thanks.
Thank you for that, Commissioner. Something else, because we were talking about youth a little bit, one thing that we've been hearing from a lot of young people, particularly with everything we're seeing in the media, young people, and the different feelings, the range of feelings that young people have as it pertains to law enforcement. And so we put together a youth and law enforcement roundtable to hear about the experiences that young people have had or that they've witnessed. And, it was really something where various units from the team, our policy team, law enforcement bureau, all hands on deck, we were there, we were able to explain our position as it pertains to working with young people, our position as it pertains to protections against things like bias-based profiling by law enforcement, and really educating the young folks about the ways that they or the organizations they're a part of in our agency here. And I think it's something that we all knew isn't needed, but hearing the real stories from so many folks who are in middle school, in high school, it's something that we hope that we can build upon moving forward. I know we're working with some local precincts in Brooklyn who have been doing some youth engagement work to see how we can do something with them and the organizations that they've been working with as well. So this is an area that is really important to us too. November was also, we had Veterans Day that took place in November. So we worked with the New York City the Department of Veteran Services as well as the State Division of Veteran Services to put together a program on protections for military members and veterans, which was well attended. A lot of great information was given there. And so I think that just continuing that work with veteran communities is something that we hope to continue to do. And I know some of our commissioners were able to attend that, so we're very thankful and grateful for you for your attendance there. And most recently, we had the 16 Days of Activism Against Gender-Based Violence, which starts on November 25th, which is the International Day for the Elimination of Violence Against Women, and lasts until December 10th, International Human Rights Day. We had a number of programs that we put together, whether it was a healing circle for trans and non-communities. That was a very, very powerful program. The healing circle was, we partnered with we partnered with Housing Works on that, and also, the Housing Works on that. We also had a conversation on violence against women, and it was a Latinx perspective. We were able to do this in collaboration with the Violence Intervention Program, and also some CPOs that work with Latinx communities. We also had an anti-sexual harassment training and legal clinic for domestic workers. And this was done in collaboration with the National Domestic Workers Alliance. And, attorneys from the Law Enforcement Bureau were also able to provide some context on the framework of the agency and what we're doing to combat gender-based harassment. We did some things for young people as well. One program was Young Activists Know and Defend Your Justice Rights, and we did this with Malachi, is an organization that works with young people. We also had another program was a census, which was a youth-led conversation, and this was in collaboration with Gender Equity and RAP as well. So a lot that we've been doing during this 60 days of activism. It felt like almost every day we had something that we were doing, but really important, because as we know, during the pandemic, there have been reports that have said that there have been, unfortunately, an increase on gender-based violence. So we wanted to make sure this was something that we addressed head on, and we were able to work with our sister agencies, the Mayor's Office to End Gender-Based Violence, our commissioner and Commissioner Noel as well from NGPV were able to have a discussion on what the city is doing to combat and end gender-based violence, particularly during the COVID-19 pandemic and what we've seen. And so that was something that we were able to put together, and it is out on our various platforms as well. If you have not seen it yet, we'll make sure that we share it with you as well. And I would say in terms of our programs and engagement, those are some of the things that have happened that many of you have been a part of and have helped lead and shape it. And we're happy that we've been able to do those.
Thanks for that, Frank. So as you can all see, the commission staff has been very busy in every office and at each level. I wanted to pause here to see if people had questions or comments regarding any of the departmental updates. Jonathan, please.
Thank you, everyone, for those phenomenal reports, and thank you for your hard work. I have a question and then just a comment. So many of the settlements that I'm reading and the laws that we're passing have the need to post notices inside of workplaces, recognizing that the vast majority of the New York City workforce has been out pretty much since March, and in some cases won't be returning likely until the spring. How does the commission account for the fact that the postings are essentially there with no one there to see them? And what accommodations or adjustments are made to ensure that employees working from home would have the same awareness of those notifications, given the fact that they're not going into the office? And then I just have a completely separate topic that I want to mention.
Sure, those are great questions. Satna, do you want to start out and then I'll chime in?
Yeah. So we've actually adjusted to the fact that we are all teleworking and telecommuting at this point, and realized that posting things in the break rooms was not going to really work because most people were not in their break rooms. So we asked that as part of our settlements, what we're asking for is that there be physical postings, but that also be virtual postings. So there are usually internal ways in which employees communicate with each other. And so we've asked postings to be there and postings to also be on websites, on the company's website.
Okay, thank you for that. And then just looking at settlements, so this month there was a settlement for religious discrimination. And so just taking a cursory look going back to 2014, the total number of religious discrimination settlements, and again, I did this in a way by just searching the word religion in each of the years. So I saw one in 2014, one in 2015, two in 2017, and one in 2020. The cases in 2017 and 2020 are similar in the sense that they were Muslim Americans who claimed that their employer was not giving them adequate time for prayer during the day. So, this is something that I really value in terms of people and their freedom to express their religion. And I want to just say one thing. Number one, I think we probably can do more of an education. And Frank, you may want to think about this for community relations, just to make sure that everybody understands that if they are discriminated at work, or they are not, or they're prohibited from carrying on their religious practices by their employer, that the commission is an outlet. So I think that we should think about some more education, because I just get the sense that there are more cases out there than we're capturing or complaints that are made. And then that reminds me that I know that one of the things that's been on the agenda, it's kind of a soft agenda item for the last couple of years, has been the commission updating its religious discrimination rules. And so I'm curious to know where that stands.
Sure. Let me start off on it. First on the, Jonathan, I'm not sure where you were looking at the, I don't know if you were looking at the annual report or if you were looking at the website. So one thing I wanted to note is our website does not list all of our conciliations and settlements. So it highlights specific settlements or conciliations that are of note. If we wanted to take a full list of how many conciliations or settlements or how many complaints were filed in an area like religious discrimination, for example, you could find that on the annual report, or we'd be happy to talk to you about the types of cases that we've been seeing. Absolutely, it's under enforced, and that's because we still need to get people in here filing at the agency. If you'll recall, like 2 or 3 years ago when we released that report that we did, where we surveyed over 3,000 Muslim, Arab, South Asian, Sikh, and Jewish New Yorkers. And one of the big findings out of that was that 71% of people said that, they have experienced discrimination, but they don't report it for a variety of different factors. And so underreporting is always the thing that our agency, and I know that other similar human rights or civil rights type agencies have to battle. So any ways that we can be working with different communities to get them incentivized to report them, we want to. A lot in some of these situations where we have gotten involved has been rather than, Sapna and the law enforcement team, Frank and his team working in the bias-based response or the bias response unit have been intervening, free or without a complaint. And so in those cases, we would never see them under the conciliation or settlement space, because that would be a situation in which the resolution was coming outside of enforcement or outside of litigation. The underlying premise of needing to get more people in to report the incidents, we 100%, 100% are trying to get that out there. And that's another reason why we try to put out, so much in our comms space and in our campaign space. When I was saying earlier that when we hear about pandemic-related discrimination or harassment, and I will say particularly, in spaces where there's a lot of hate that gets spewed in all of these contexts against Jewish communities that have been pandemic-related, whenever any of us hear that, we immediately put more things out in our comm spaces and make sure that Jonah and other folks from our agency are out there talking to people. But getting people to actually report them in for purposes of enforcement continues to be a challenge. And then, go ahead. Sorry, John.
No, thank you for that explainer, and the fact that the website doesn't capture all the enforcement. And
yeah. And then the guidance that we've been working on with regards to religious discrimination, that's still been in the works. It's a combination of different things that have happened both at the federal level and then just locally, just trying to be very thoughtful about the approach and considering other things that are going on from a civil rights, human rights, or litigation perspective. So we continue to be working on that. And what's nice is, Jonathan, as you know, because you were very helpful in also having us connect with folks, especially from different Jewish communities who I think are particularly interested in that space. Also just wanting to make sure that we're getting input from all the communities that we should be getting.
And just a technical question. Some of the rules that we vote on have to originate in the city council. Is this one of those, or this is something that we can just tackle on our own and procure the rules independent of the council?
So none of our rules, none of our rules have to originate with city council. Pretty much, we have, I'm trying to think, any rules that we've gone through a formal rulemaking process with, we have first engaged in in releasing legal enforcement guidance. And we've done that very intentionally because we're basically taking existing law, putting out legal enforcement guidance with our implementation of the law, creating a period by which New Yorkers understand, adjust, adapt to, go back and forth in discussion with the agency as to challenges they have with our implementation perspective or questions they have. And then after that period, go into formal rulemaking, because we want people and entities to be able to succeed at following the law. We want them to understand how we're implementing. And so rather than going right into rulemaking, we've always first released legal enforcement guidance to create that space where people can adapt and conform to their, to the guidance. In none of those situations do we have to seek any sort of approval with the city council. It is only in situations where we are amending the law, meaning there's a statutory change, where city council has gotten involved.
Okay, thank you for that. I appreciate it.
Guillermo.
Yeah, thank you for the amazing work and the update on the departments. One comment and one request. I think it would be great if we can get more things, not to wait for a meeting, but, in a more regular basis, just for us to distribute among our networks what the commission is producing. And the second piece is to respectfully request a consideration in the use of some words. Like, for example, brown to describe Latinos or Hispanic Latinx is not very inclusive, especially if you're an Afro-Latino, if you're a Garifuna from Honduras, etc., or from Mixteca nations in Mexico, do not really reflect who we are. And the second piece is the use of words like target, have a military connotation. We can use focus on or priority on, but maybe a request to overall, review language that we use that sometimes stigmatize. And I think, language justice, that is a whole sector and growing, by the way, especially post census that we just conclude. And the healing that we need also is to be very inclusive and sensitive about. And also, I'm very, very happy about the initiatives against, discrimination, and especially the attack and increasing attack against hate motivated, that the city, unfortunately, is not immune to that. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that, Guillermo. I really do appreciate those comments. Two things on them both. One is, just in terms of word choice and the words that we use, the staff can tell you that this is something that comes up pretty regularly at our agency, trying to make sure that we are being inclusive, that we're using words that don't inflict any sort of injury, spirit injury or otherwise, or don't kind of summon other areas that that are not consistent with a human rights approach. So, I wanted to tell you how much I appreciate that, and specifically, interesting that you bring that. We post, especially post-election, there's just been a lot written about different Latinx communities. Hispanic and Latinx communities, and just self-identification within those communities. It's been a conversation that we have talked about in the past at the agency, but we've kind of reprioritized given a lot of the conversation that we've been seeing in the public and in the media on this. And we, in fact, just had a brown bag speaker come into the agency who's a professor from Fordham, giving her perspective in this space. And we said that we are going to be reaching out to you, Guillermo, to follow up on that. So funny that you say that. The other thing I wanted to say is that, I'll leave it at that, because that's kind of inclusive of my other comment. There's going to be more to come in this space, because regardless of, any election results, I think there were different discussions that came up in the context of human rights related issues that make it such that we need to, I think, reprioritize how we are talking to different communities and how that messaging is coming through. And certainly, you know, Hispanic and Latinx communities is just an example of an area where that is the case. But you will be hearing from us very, very soon on that. Thank you. Other questions or comments? Terry, please. Nice to see you. I think you are still muted, Terry.
How's that? Okay. Thank you for this unbelievable report. I got 3 pages of notes, and that's like just the tip of the iceberg. Appreciate it. And I had 2 thoughts while I learned so much just now. So one is on the hospital, a project that Sapna was talking about. And none of those hospitals were Staten Island. And we see, I can't say what kind of discrimination, but people that are undocumented that go to emergency rooms or get treatment get turned out, in my opinion, inappropriately or not served correctly. Only in one case did I get an apology from the hospital on a case where they turned a person out 3 times in a row and the man eventually died. But I never thought of it in light of the Commission on Human Rights, or that there could have been a case brought, you know. But I just think that if you could include, you know, Staten Island in the next round, I think that it would be a revealing thing. The second was on the issue of the religious discrimination. So we are doing test and trace in the Hasidic communities on Staten Island, and really making great inroads. But the conversations I have that I can't answer the question on is, why is it that you can have protests where people are not masked in the city? Of course, we mask on Staten Island. Make no mistake about that. Just kidding. And yet, if there's a religious gathering in the Hasidic community, there is an outcry if people are not wearing masks. And is religious discrimination present here, or are their rights protected because they're gathering in a sanctuary for a religious function? How do you answer that?
I mean, it's so just on that second one, I mean, those situations can be very troubling. This is an area where, one, we've been a part of a greater task force on different equity-related issues regarding the pandemic and pandemic-related issues. Social distancing enforcement has been one of them. And then where we find that because of and in addition to how enforcement may be disparate in some situations, you know, there's a follow-up in discrimination or harassment against different communities. So we've been working with the mayor's office. What is it called? What's the hate crimes? Office to Prevent Hate Crimes. Right, the Office to Prevent Hate, Deb Louder's agency or office, and some other offices at City Hall, and then with other agencies when things like this happen. You know, it's what I think what is very challenging is that as far as we are told or as we know, they tend to be very kind of precinct or area specific. So when we have questions from a human rights perspective, that comes up, you know, on the tail end as things happen, because we're looking at local precincts or local spaces. I think I probably mentioned this during a prior commissioners meeting. You know, we have been looking to put together or reconstitute the Commission's historic legal observer unit to take part in these specific spaces. But that has been a process in trying to work it out with the different areas of the administration and PD. But I don't have a good answer for you, because I think that there is a problem in this space.
Okay, appreciate that. Thanks.
Yeah.
So I'm not the only one that doesn't answer. I appreciate that.
I mean, I think sadly one of the issues is that people don't have great answers on this space. And we need to be we need to be working towards a situation where, coming from the government, we have answers and good answers in this space. So we're with you on that. But we're going to follow up with you on that, Terry, because I just want to make sure that our people are where they need to be in the specific communities that you're talking about. You know that we do quite a bit within Staten Island community, so I just want to make sure. Okay. Sharon?
Well, just to say, it's been a complicated thing because some of the questions that have been raised by some in the Hasidic or the Haredi community, and even the case that went to the Supreme Court, had apples to oranges in comparisons, like saying allowing people to shop in supermarkets is somehow discriminatory than having hundreds of people in a synagogue spaced together. And there's real differences that exist also. But it is a very sensitive space and it has to be handled with a lot of nuance. But there's a real difference between shopping masked for X amount of time in order to get food to putting hundreds, if not thousands of people in an indoor space for an extended period of time where there's a lot of singing, which is, we know, a high risk for aerosolization of the virus. But it's been, because there hasn't been great leadership, honestly, from the top, it's been a very confused debate when I don't think it really needs to be. I think it's possible to have very clear and fairly enforced standards. It's just been, we're living in such a mess.
Thanks, Sharon. Any other questions or comments on departmental updates? Okay. So I'm going to move on. We have a few more minutes, and I wanted to just use those few minutes to, one, remind folks that we are now about a year out to the end of this administration. We are so proud of the work that we've been able to accomplish thus far, in the past few years. And again, thank you and much gratitude to all of you that have really supported the work and helped us with that work. I wanted to check in though. So given that there is still a year left in this administration, we want to check in about other specific areas. If there were other specific areas that you as commissioners felt we needed to make sure that we are reprioritizing or focusing on or refocusing on, where you're not aware of ongoing work that is happening or ongoing enforcement that is happening, where we need to be doing that, especially in this coming year. I wanted to leave some time for us to have this discussion. All of you have different terms. I know some of you have just had reappointments. Some of you, I think, are in a space where your reappointment time is coming up soon. And there are other issues of that. To the extent that people have questions on that, we're happy to help you and work with the appointments team, the Mayor's Office of Appointments, to figure out any of those issues. And so I guess I'll just leave it open right now. If there are spaces, again, there's a year. A year is not a lot of time. As many of you who have been in the city and in city government know, it's also kind of an interesting year because it's the end of the term, and so that makes some things go a lot slower. That makes some things actually go a lot faster. But we wanted to get your thoughts or your input as to areas that we need to bring back, reprioritize, or if you're not aware of the work that is happening in that space that you think we have to be doing before this administration's term ends. We really need to be focusing on something. Rocky and then Guillermo, yes?
Well, thank you for giving us this opportunity. I think two things. One is going back to your budget discussion. And I'm just sharing this, having been at the commission in the early years when we've gone up and down in terms of that. Commissioners, I think, also have our networks, and I think the budget is a really critical issue. regardless of who's the mayor or who's, you know, lame duck or whatever. So I think it's really important for us to kind of reach out, I would say, to our networks to say that civil rights do not take, you know, a backseat in terms of budget cuts, and, you know, to work up from 50 or whatever it was to 160, and even that is probably not enough, right? I think something like that needs to be done. I'm not saying anything specific right now, but I think we need to take kind of a very a robust attitude, as the commission has done quite a lot. The point I'd like to just kind of throw out is I think the education part is really important. I've always wondered, like, if there's a way we can figure this out in terms of the public education system, you know, even though there's this line between the Department of Education and human rights, but if there's a way we can do it. So I would like to just think of ways that maybe we could underline some of the work that's being done in the media, the videos maybe that the commission has done, public education, even the mural kind of thing, if it can be packaged in a way. You know, it seems like there's a human rights commission, human rights curriculum or civil rights curriculum that really should be part of the public education experience. And, you know, maybe that's something even at this transition that would be a good thing to do, especially when all these people are running for office now. So it's my 2 cents.
Thanks for that, Rock. We do quite a bit actually with DOE, but in terms of really kind of systematizing and institutionalizing this, right. I think one, that's been a challenge, and then I think just because of all the different challenges that DOE has been going through since, you know, last year, when students went into a remote environment, it's been very challenging to get the time with the right people to further concretize some of the programming we have. But that's absolutely a great thing for us to be going back to. Thank you. Guillermo?
Yes, thank you. I just want to echo what Rocky was saying, and it's a call to all the commissioners that in our work with city government that we defend the budget of the New York City Commission on Human Rights, and on the issues to address as we go into 2021 from the lens of human rights. Definitely we need more gender and sexual orientation awareness and work around to avoid this, to confront discrimination. And the second piece is go deeper on the discrimination of accessing healthcare. And finally, how important is from the lens of human rights to process the outcome of Census 2020. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Guillermo. Terry?
Now that I know how to do the unmute button, I'm unstoppable. First, I just wanted to acknowledge and give thanks for Commissioner Frank Joseph for coming out and speaking on Staten Island virtually at our anti-bias conference, and to Alex, Juan, and Daniela, who actually know how to work Zoom and were so helpful to have the commission as our partner in getting the anti-bias conference off the ground. More than 322 different people attended 8 workshops over a, 5-6 day period. So that was major for Staten Island. So thank you very much for your support of the conference. And then I just wanted to piggyback on what Rocky just said. Outside of the DOE even, we really need some kind of grassroots anti-discrimination curriculum that not to have necessarily people from human rights present, but to train the trainers and get people out in the community, because this stuff needs to happen in our religious institutions, and it needs to happen in our civic association meetings and the places where we cross issues of neighborhood lines and all kinds of discrimination issues. So I think that's really important, including the history of discrimination, which you all have highlighted in some of the pieces that have been produced over the last couple of years. But specific to Staten Island, we have our own history of racism that the story has not been so fully told yet. And that's the kind of legacy going forward, regardless of the next administration. If there's something in print that we could take and do sessions and teach people, that's where we have to start. And it's best to start in preschool. But for those of us that are past preschool, we got to learn it anyway. And I hope that's some way that could be a legacy that happens before the next administration. Thank you.
Thanks for that, Terry. And thank you for shouting out the Staten Island team. They're awesome. We all know that they're awesome. Thank you. Any other questions or comments? No? Any other new business folks want to raise? Nope. Okay. It is 12:25. I think we're able to conclude this quarterly commissioners meeting. Just want to say thanks again to all of you for being active, engaged, interested in the work, and helpful. I really do. We all so much appreciate it. And I also just appreciate how much so many of our commissioners actually know our staff and our staff's names, and because I feel every day very blessed to have what I think is the most committed and hardworking staff in city government. So thank you all for also acknowledging them and for getting to know them, because it's the reason we all do the work that we do, right? Anyway, so thanks to everyone. Hope you all have a good holiday season. Hope you're all safe and healthy, and have a good rest of your day. Thank you.